Meanwhile, amid a gloomy global economic outlook and risks of an imminent global recession, the IMF has raised the ceiling of the financing provided to countries, while the World Bank are also set to deploy around $170 billion to help countries deal with an array of crises. VOA's Virginia Gunawan has the full report from the IMF World Bank annual meetings in Washington, D.C.
After a week of hosting the International Monetary Fund's fall meeting with the economic leaders from at least 190 member countries, it is forecasted that the 2023 global economic growth will still be gloomy. Challenges ranging from the increased interest rate, climate change, food crisis, strong dollar, high inflation, and a still prevalent pandemic all combined to hit global economy and the livelihoods of hundreds of millions. IMF Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva, at the closing of the summit, warned that the world is fragmented and more prone to shock.
We are entering a new dangerous zone, a world that is more fragmented, more fragile, and more prone to shocks that can quickly knock countries off course. What we are experiencing is a fundamental shift from a period of relative stability, low rates, low inflation, to a period of high rates, high inflation, much greater uncertainty.
The couple of journalists who I talked to throughout the summit calling this fall meeting as the last stop before the next year's economic storm. Analysts have been predicted the high possibility of the U.S. going into recession next year, while Europe will be facing high energy costs and China will suffer its lowest growth in decades. Given the grim look of the economy, IMF has temporarily raised the ceiling of the financing it provides to the countries by 50% using its emergency window, while World Bank announced last April to deploy around $170 billion through June 2023 to help countries address multiple overlapping crises. World Bank Group President David Malpass pushed on green and sustainable source of energy to combat inflation and high energy prices.
Faced with inflation and high energy prices, and the world needs to think in terms of cleaner fuels and transition fuels in order to help move the world forward. Less carbon-intensive fuels as the solution and the direction for the world.
Well, this is the first time since pandemic we are seeing delegates from around the world coming together again to meet. Geopolitical tension was apparent, especially on Russia's invasion in Ukraine. The G20 yet again failed to issue communique, while Russia also prevented the IMF from reaching consensus over a joint readout. Now, the lingering questions for the next significant meeting for economic leaders, which is the G20 meeting in Bali, is whether Indonesia will be hosting United States President Joe Biden, President Vladimir Putin of Russia, and Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky in the meeting.